There needs to be paid staff. It is true that paid staff frequently can be less expensive, although, as a final note, Santa Cruz in part went to the auditor model because they costed it out and found it would save money.
All right. Let's see. Chief Nielsen, do you have any comments about this budget sort of question?
Well, I think it depends on what the role of the group is going to be. I believe that if the role is going to be one of advisory, I think that that could be staffed by volunteers. But if you're talking about truly review, oversight, I absolutely believe that you need to have paid people who are experts in their field to be doing that.
All right. And Barbara?
Yeah, I have to agree. I think that, I think that the cost of civilian oversight is part of the cost of policing, and I think that it needs to be part of city government or county government. And I think that you definitely need, I think it's important if you have a civilian review board that you have volunteers. Even in Berkeley, the board received a stipend because they put in a lot of hours, and we costed it out they've received $200 a month since it was started in '75. So those 1975 $200 would have been about $1,000 today, but they've stayed at that rate. But I do think it's very important to have professional staff to back them up, to do the investigations if you're going to do investigations, and to provide them with the information they need to make decisions.
And you are paid for what you do, right?
I am paid. I'm paid by the city of San Jose. All the three places I work, the board in San Francisco, I think, is about a $2.5 million agency now. The Berkeley Police Review Commission costs about $700,000, and my office, altogether, the costs are about $800,000.
All right, thank you. Sheriff Phil?
I really have no idea what it would cost. I would imagine, I don't know what the price would be, but there would be some costs as an agency that has a number of volunteer organizations we participate with. I definitely know that even volunteers do not come without cost. Everything costs. So I would imagine there would be a noticeable cost to having any type of review or auditing done. And I am paid for what I do, yes.
Thank you. Christina, we'll start with you on the next question. How well versed and trained are peace officers with the United States Constitution and the role of understanding civil rights, for example, the 14th and 13th Amendments?
Well, briefly, if I could answer the last question too, I would just say that the cost is more than offsets the costs of claims. In Humboldt County, one haircut cost $100,000 one year, so I think we could have a pretty good review board for that for 1 year. I haven't been to the police academy as much as I would like to, so I don't know what their training is about the Constitution. That kind of seems like a tongue-in-cheek question almost, but I know that they are charged with protecting the Constitution and all of our rights, and so perhaps the law enforcement officers can speak to that better.
All right, thank you. Bob, do you want to respond?
Sure. I have not been to an academy, but I have reviewed the materials that are used at post-academies. Generally, what officers are trained in are nuts and bolts. They're not trained the way lawyers are in these global concepts and the penumbra of this and that, but they're trained much more in the concrete. These are the circumstances under which you can search. These are the circumstances under which you cannot. These are the circumstances where you can take someone into custody. These are the circumstances where you are not. It tends to be pretty concrete, and most peace officers, either everyone in the department, or at least some of the people in the department, carry a book that's published annually by the, I believe it's the State Justice Department. It's a black-covered book, and they can go through, it's got summaries of search and seizure law, and they carry that with them with their ticket books.
All right, thank you. Barbara?
You know, I don't have much to add to that other than what Bob and Christina said. I think I mostly defer to our law enforcement members of the panel, but I have seen even issues with officers having trouble with the Fifth Amendment. So, you know, I think I'll defer on that one. Thanks.
All right, Chief Nielsen, and I misspoke, it's the Fourth Amendment they're concerned about, as well as the 13th.
Well, I think that they get as good a training as can be expected. You know, the laws relative to search and seizure and those kinds of things are ever changing. They're evolutionary. I think our officers get relatively good training in the nuts and bolts, as Bob said, in how to do their job and when they can and can't. All of our officers carry the field resource guide, which they can refer to. I think that if we want to talk about those areas where they don't get appropriate training, it's how to handle people who have mental health issues and some of those things that they routinely encounter in their day-to-day activities. And if we're going to look at enhancing their training, I would certainly, those are the areas where I would like to see the emphasis placed.
Thank you. Sheriff Phil?
I pretty much agree with what's been said. The chief and Bob have said here. Pretty much the officers are trained in the nuts and bolts of search and seizures and the laws of arrest, and they do get updates on a regular basis on case law, specific to you can do this, you can't do that, and this is what you'd have to do. So it is the nuts and bolts types, and I also agree with the chief that I think they get hammered with that a lot, and we are much more weaker in the areas of how to deal with people with mental health problems and such, and which are community issues and that we get called into contact with. So that would be what I have to add.
All right, thank you. Barbara, we'll start the next question with, it's directed to you. There are actually two that are sort of related, so I'll see if we can work them together. Who or what would have oversight of the Oversight Committee, and what do you think is the best model for a community like ours? And can you give some examples of problems that you've observed with oversight or encountered with oversight?
That's a good question. Who has oversight of the oversight? We do have a national association that's in the process of establishing professional standards for that field. This field's about, a little over 35 years old, so it's a new field. Establishing those kinds of standards is kind of an evolutionary thing, so we're working on that. I'm sorry, what was the next part of the question?
What do you think is the best model? Did you?
Oh, the best model.
You haven't
observed
any problems?
Yeah. As I said, usually the community comes to that decision, what's the best model for it. Seattle has all three models. They have an auditor, they have someone who leads the internal affairs office, and so she comes under the police chief but runs the internal affairs office. They also have a civilian review board. I don't know, I think that this city has been asking for oversight for many years. I think that a civilian review board is a good thing. I also think that the auditor model has some benefits. And there are problems in each, so I need another minute someplace else. So.
Okay, well, we could just go on with that question, and everybody can respond to that.
Okay.
If you want to finish.
Problems in each, Bob mentioned expertise. When you have a civilian review board, you do get people with very different skills, very different abilities. It would be good to have some standards for who you put on a civilian review board. The San Francisco model, where the agency investigates everything and is the only agency investigating